where I come along often is to take them to a belief system that they can be stronger and bigger and safer. That's the point that sometimes they miss.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Growth and Scaling Podcast. Today, we are blessed to have with us Ian, and Ian is a master, M&A master, acquisition master. I'm so excited to get his input on lots of different topics. Ian, tell us who you are and what you do.
Right. Hi, Todd. Yeah, sure. So, in a nutshell, I'm really an entrepreneur at heart. I think I can safely say that after 37 years. I started very young.
That's
Started when
very
I was
safe.
3. No, so for me, what I like to think of myself is I've been on a journey, and it started in finance, and in Scotland, that's a good way to start because once you become a chartered accountant,
Right.
the whole world seems to be, well, if you become a chartered accountant, nothing's going to stop you. Well, I mean, obviously that was a slight mistake because clearly it's quite a narrow but a very prestigious thing to get when you're young. But I
Right.
grabbed that and disappeared into the world of finance, and then sort of pivoted, if you like, out of young finance director jobs into M&A and investment banking. And in those days, it
Awesome.
was so early in those days, like there was Goldman Sachs and all the big names, but there weren't really many small boutiques, investment
Right.
banks that really wanted to handle the acquisition or the sale of businesses that were smaller. It wasn't a massively
Totally.
well-serviced community. So in Europe, we were one of the first, and it was a blast because you were doing, if you pardon the expression, missionary work, because it was early days. I mean, and
Right.
so so that was great fun, and that became a career in investment banking,
Love
working for
it.
public companies. And but what defined me and gave me a lot of confidence really to talk about entrepreneurship was when I came to Boston 22 years ago to turn around a software business. So when you're turning around a
Uh-huh.
business, there's no way you can fake it. You're right. You're in. You're bleeding cash, and you have to
Right.
learn really really quickly how to run a business. You don't have much time.
Right.
So that gave me that aspect of it. And then even more germane to this audience, I hope, is that since 2010 I've been scaling businesses in New England, almost as a kind of hands-on, you'd almost call it an operating partner, like the way private equity has put operations at the
Right.
head of their, I mean, obviously they've got the money, but their office, obviously they're trying to differentiate themselves more than ever of how good they are at
Totally.
operations. We're an operational private equity company. So I felt there was a gap like you do in entrepreneurship in terms of scaling from X to Y. And so I felt I could add value,
Right.
with hands-on, very much
I
hands-on,
love it.
fractional work. And so I've had a blast. The unusual kink was the last few years to end the story, which was when my main client was bought by a Swedish public company and they put me on the
Oh
payroll.
boy.
That wasn't quite the plan. It's like
No
I went
kidding.
from 1 day a week to 4 days a week to 5 days a week, and I said, "You do understand how consulting works? Like, I can't have one, I can't
Right.
have one client 5 days a week." Oh well, do you want the
Right.
payroll? I
Right.
said, "No, you can't afford me." So that was a good negotiation. But I had come out of that at the beginning of the year, and I'm back to my passion, which is helping companies
Good.
scale.
It is fun when you kind of understand the recipe of what to
Right,
do to grow and scale a
right.
business. It's nice to be able to hit more people than just
That's
one,
right. That's
right?
right. That's right. And the thing always blows entrepreneurs away is just how special they are. And they say, "No, stop it. Stop flattering me." I said, "Okay, let me put it in numbers then for you. So how many companies run a payroll in the US?" They say, "Well, I don't know. It must be a lot." I say, "Well,
Right.
it's 6.1 million is the number." "Oh, okay." And how many companies employ more than 100 people? "Oh, I don't know. It's maybe millions." No, it's 116,000 companies out of 6.1.
Oh my gosh.
So the reality is, as in Europe, it's a Powers law curve. It crawls along the x-axis. It's a land of small companies. Like
Right.
98% of American companies employ less than 100 people. And so when I said to a local businessman in Boston, you've got 120 staff, you should be telling them that in the top 1.6% of American enterprise. He said, it was an
Right.
ESOP. So he
No
was really
kidding.
keen to tell them that. I said, so I,
That's
I,
cool.
entrepreneurship going from one employee yourself to two or three people, it should not be underestimated. So anyone out there who's got 10 and 20 and 30 employees,
Right.
they are warriors. And so I applaud that grit, that courage.
Right.
Where I come along often is to take them to a belief system that they can be stronger and bigger and safer. That's the point that sometimes they miss.
Yeah.
If you've got a certain level of profits, there's an element of sort of lurching from payroll to payroll a little bit, and
Right.
it's stressful. And what size does give you is a
Yes.
safety measurement. You know what I mean? And I'm talking size, meaning probably a million at least EBIT or profit before tax, or I
Sure.
mean, or certainly heading towards that, and obviously way beyond that to 5 and 10 million profits.
Right. Right.
But scaling's not for everyone. So if you're in headhunting and there's five of you, bringing
Right.
500,000 home every week or every year rather, I mean, who needs to scale? It's like, the four of you are having a great life,
It's
right?
true.
So, I mean,
It's true. It's
but
true.
my issue is that
Eh,
people do want to scale, and I want to show them how. Yeah.
So what is the mechanism that you use to do this?
Right.
I mean, do you have a training? Do you have a site? Like,
Right.
what are you doing to help
Right.
give those 1.6% of people
Mm,
a chance to, or companies,
mm,
the chance to grow even bigger?
yeah.
Or are you trying to help more of that 98% who are trying to get
Right.
there, get there?
So it's a great question. I would say that on the 98%, what we're doing with them is almost operationalizing them and making them stronger and better and probably bigger because of that, and ultimately
Right.
saleable. Now, saleable doesn't mean you sell. Saleable, we talk about salability as an options strategy. You've got the option to
Right.
sell, right? You don't want to
Right.
not have that option. So we look at those companies in the 98%, we actually look at them through the lens of a buyer of the business, because
Interesting.
that way you begin to see where there is shareholder value being lost. So what does that look like?
Right.
Dependency on four customers, dependency on the owner, dependency on legacy products. So the worst word in the world for an acquirer of a business or an investor is dependency. It's not a good thing. It tastes like chicken isn't a compliment, right? It's,
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean? It's like
Right. Right.
you're dependent. Now, of course, it's great to have great customers. What I find is
Yeah.
that with scaling, people aren't leveraging those great customers quickly enough to dilute them down.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? So nothing wrong with having great customers. You just have to not rely on that, because to bring it back to the M&A world, I've gone through some painful situations where you're at the letter of intent. That is, you've done the whole dance with a buyer and you're on the selling side. And you think,
Right.
well, I'm at the letter of intent. I've got the terms. The money looks right. Blah blah blah. There's no chance of this falling over. Now here's the reality. 50% of deals will fall over after that, and because
Is that
oh
right?
yeah, it's ridiculously. I mean, and probably a lot more than that, because what happens is that you know one of your key customers, it actually happened to me in the UK. In this case, it was in the recruitment business, a very specialist recruitment
Yeah.
business. It was the IT recruitment business, so it was contract and full time IT specialists. So just did IT,
Yeah.
but Amex was 35% of the business. Now, we knew that. The
Wow.
buyer knew it. The problem was the Amex didn't care that we were going through a sale, because they didn't know we were going through a sale. So they fired the client 4 weeks before completion. Now,
Oh my gosh.
what that does to a buyer, it does something very strange. It frightens them. So
Yeah,
the buyer didn't say,
that's not too.
hold on, I'll just adjust the price. No, the buyer says,
Yeah,
bye bye. Now,
I'm out.
there's a happy end to that story, which was they filled that gap with more reliable and a greater variety of clients, and we sold it for a premium
Right.
price. But it took 2 years. Now, so what else?
Well,
You see what I mean?
this is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is a really interesting dichotomy of how you're looking at this, what
right,
just happened there, because
right,
two things I want to bring up is, first of all, I would say the vast majority of that 98% of the businesses out there
right,
never really consider their exit. They don't
right,
think about to what end am I building this business? Is it to
right,
pass to my kids? Is it something that I
right,
want to sell? Is it something I
right.
want to do in 3 years?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
something that's the first thing. Second thing is, understanding the numbers and
mm,
understanding what a buyer is actually looking for in your business.
right,
Because yes, you talk about EBITDA, and
right,
yes, you talk about a great client that you depend on, but
right,
let's dive a little deeper into this. First
yeah,
of all, talk about exit planning, and then
right,
help us understand what is a buyer looking at when
right.
they want to acquire business.
So the service that we are offering really is at that 98% level. We tend to be working with them to make the business more robust and more
Right.
and a higher visibility of earnings is what the posh analysts would call it, i.e. you can see the profits coming at you. Right?
Right.
Visibility of earnings just means you can actually predict your profits a wee bit better. That's and that grooming work is really, in a nutshell, you could call it exit planning work, because that exit planning work or that operational work can take 1 to 25 years. It's up to you, right? I mean, you can
Wow.
just keep doing it because it's a better way of running your business, right? So that's the
Right.
98%. The 2% tends to be the clients that want to go on the acquisition trail. And for them, of course, we're teaching them how to be better acquirers, because about 90% of acquisitions are a failure in terms of adding value, which is a horrendous track record. I mean,
Is that right?
it's just horrendous. If you look at all the major surveys done in terms of the buyer's view 2 years
Yeah.
after the deal, it tends to be a graveyard of failed dreams.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
Now, it can be much better than that. Obviously, if we're advising you, no, it can be much better than that
Of course.
if you adopt the right playbook. I mean, certainly Google and other big practice acquirers will have a much stronger hit rate. I mean, I would imagine more like 50, 60, 70% are a success. But if you take the
Yeah.
overall average of the research, so if you link those two things, what's often the case is a lot of private companies are coming to market to sell, and they're not ready to sell. They're not ready for prime
Right.
time, right? And
Right.
and even if they get the deal done, the acquirers made a lot of compromises that aren't fixed in the post-acquisition phase. So that there's a lot of that
Right.
going on, right? And we often find that businesses are coming to market too early. Like that extra year and a half to 2 years of runway to fix operational issues is worth
Yeah. Yeah.
millions, maybe tens of millions, right?
I would
And
think so. I would think
it's
so.
it's not even an age related thing, because I've seen 35-year-olds burnt out, and I've seen 70-year-olds wanting a longer contract. Like,
Right. Right.
it's not a money. I mean, so go back to wrapping a few of those questions into one. So in terms of exit planning, I mean, as I said to you before, we have lots of free stuff on our website. We just published, in fact, we published this morning one on divestiture. But prior to that, a month ago, we published the exit playbook. And the whole idea of the exit playbook, first of
Love
all,
it.
it's complimentary. And secondly,
Yeah.
of course, it covers planners and advisors you should have, and wealth management and tax, and it covers that sort of stuff. But it takes you back a couple of years at least and says, look at the business through the eyes of an acquirer, and give yourself what we call the saleability test. It's
Totally.
15 questions. You can actually score yourself. And
Wow.
often you'll find that people will say, so it's 15 questions, 5 points for a top answer. So even the lawyers in the room can work out that 5 times 15 is 75. Only joking.
Right.
Um, so
Right.
nobody is
Smart. Smart.
75. If you've got 75, you're lying to yourself, right? And me. But often they'll score maybe 40, and yet it's a great business. Why are they scoring
Yeah.
40? Well, because some of the answers are zero. So one question: have you got second tier management that were regarded as world class underneath you? No.
Yeah.
They can't even answer one. They go, no, that's a problem. Okay, and you don't need too many zeros for your score to be 40, right? And could
Right.
you sell? You could sell that business probably. Would you get top value? No. Might it not close? Absolutely, it might not close. And now you've
I
gone
love it.
through the pain of letting everyone see your business in public, and even if
I
you do
know,
a,
right?
you know what I mean, like even if you do a covert auction, you're still
Yeah.
having to let people in under NDAs and all that. So we say, look, there's a better way. There's a better way. Run the business to make it saleable, even if you never sell, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and on the acquisition side of things, the research is overwhelming on this. Why acquisitions fail isn't because people overpay. It's because they're terrible and haven't thought through post-acquisition integration. So
Right.
you can't measure the success of an acquisition at closing. You can celebrate
No.
closing. We closed the deal.
2
It's
years
down the
after it.
line, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway, that's some answers that help. And again, a lot of this is in free playbooks on our website, so that
Which
people can
website are you
then,
talking about?
yeah. So use the portfolio partnership. So it's quite a nice, easy, portfolio partnerships. Portfoliopartnership.com. There's
Awesome.
free textbooks, free stuff there. Blogs. There's a weekly blog as well that I do. Again, I'm writing for an audience that is busy and wants a
Yeah.
one-page checklist. They don't want to read War and Peace. They want
Right.
jugular advice that's thought through and measured.
I
But
love it.
I just think this. And the other thing about acquisitions is that people talk a lot about grooming for sale. You're getting a company ready for sale, and it's absolutely correct, right? What
Right.
we should be talking about as well is grooming people to be an acquirer. There's a lot of acquirers who are like high school kids who are dreaming about the gold medal around their neck or the Olympic
Yeah.
Olympic final. They forget the 10 years of gym and weights training, the 90
Right.
miles on the road every week, the track work, need it, like it's a long journey. And I think that I actually think that many entrepreneurs, it's nothing to do with working hard. They're all working hard. It's whether they're
Right.
working clever. And that's
You
what we try
know,
and do. Yeah.
just a few seconds to let you know about a project that we've been putting together for the last several months, and we're finally launching it, called the Captain's Council. You see, as a CEO or operator of a business, it can feel like you get stuck in your own head a lot of the time. You get challenges that you don't know how to resolve. You get people causing problems in your leadership team that you don't know how to resolve. And it's so hard to overcome those things by yourself. You don't have to anymore. Join the Captain's Council. Captain's Council is a group of other CEOs and operators and owners of businesses where we come together once a month for several hours to discuss the biggest challenges you're facing. You express to the council of 8 to 10 people about what's going on. Where do you feel stuck? And these other people are in the same boat as you. They're running and operating their own businesses. They're your peers. They help you kind of dissect what's happening and help you see things that you may not have seen all by yourself. If you don't have a good, strong network of people around you, come join the Captain's Council. This is going to be something that will change the way you run your business and open your eyes to opportunities that you have never seen without the help of your peer group. Come check it out, captainscouncil.com. And you bring up a lot of great points, because I think that from my experience in exit, I've exited a few companies now,
Yes.
and I guess if you were to pick one flag that says, hey, you might be ready to be sold, or you might be ready for someone to buy you.
Yes.
For me personally, I always look at it as, hey, am I super frazzled and freaking out right now every day? Or
Right. Right.
do I have people running the different parts of my business do I have someone running my sales? Do I have someone running my
Right.
marketing? Do I have,
Mm.
what do you look at and how do you know when you are ready? Because I think a lot of people
Right.
in our audience may be wondering,
Yes.
is that day ever going to come?
Right. So there's two levels to that. One is kind of like the market level, where frankly, 2021 was quite a good year to sell your business. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you seem to, it's a bit like, I mean, I'm old enough to say that, in 1999 and 2020, there was a lot of PowerPoint decks getting funded, right? I don't
Yes,
think
there were.
there might have been a product behind that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe
So
not.
maybe not. So there's a lot of timing and that macro timing thing. And I think you can, if you know your sector, and you should know your sector well enough, you probably can smell when a timing's good or bad. I mean, sometimes it can be in
Right.
the middle, right? The
Right.
second element is just what you've got more control over, which is your own business. And I think I would certainly point to the saleability test that would help a
Yeah.
lot. And I think there are some aspects of that would point to you fixing them first and not even trying to go to market because the risks are too
Right.
high. And
Right.
those are the dependency ones. So I was involved in a semiconductor related business, and there was, even up to 2016, they were relying on products that had been built in the 80s and 90s and were enhanced, but enhanced is still a legacy product, right? It's not
Right.
really.
Right. Right.
And when they launched, after a lot of research, a new product aimed at higher volume to satisfy the data center market and the other and bandwidth requirements of the new world,
Right.
it was the highest selling product in the next year it was launched. But it grabbed 50% of the sales revenue number. And that's
Holy
the
cow.
most successful product launch I've ever seen, but it was embedded in 30 years of thinking about it, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
it
It's
was
an it's
deep
an
knowledge.
overnight success after
Yeah,
30 years, right?
exactly. It was an overnight 30-year success. No, they got lucky, and they were unlucky before, and they got lucky this time. But luck and hard work, there's a connection there.
Agreed.
Sometimes.
Agreed.
So that's one example. But often, I think that people don't need much of a runway to fix a business in terms of making it more saleable. Even if it's making money, there's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
things to be done to make it saleable. And so
Right.
one example, to go to your question, Todd, directly, is if you've had, for example, two good strong years of growth at like 15, 20%, maybe more if it's in a
Right.
certain sector, and your third year is forecasting another good year, that is the beginnings of a financially good time. Because what you
Love
what
it.
you've got to remember is that when you're in the middle of a year and you think it's going to start to flatten, that's the year that the due diligence is pouring over. So
Right.
you're like, it's just a one-off year. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's just a very
Smart.
myopic, right? It's a very tiny part of it. But I think that I just love getting businesses in the shape, and again going down the checklist, um, so that they are saleable. But here's the thing you'll enjoy being a marketeer. In
Yeah.
Massachusetts has 4,000 software companies, right? 4,000. Most of them are mumbling on their websites about what they do. I mean, really,
Yes.
a PhD, you still
Yes.
wouldn't work out what they do. You'd be saying things like, okay, try again. It's like,
Agreed.
okay, third,
Agreed.
third time's a charm. Come on, tell me what you do.
Not
Well, we
usually.
do.
Not usually.
No, no. So I think that what I would say in terms of, you addressed it earlier, what are the playbooks? I mean, what can you codify entrepreneurship and say, no, it's all about gut feeling and all that? And I say nonsense. No, you definitely can codify it. So the biggest playbook that sits way above everything else is the positioning playbook. Like, if you don't
Yeah.
know who you are, you don't know who to recruit. You don't know what to
Right.
measure. You don't know what story to tell. So
Yeah.
until you know who you are, I think the rest is. But once you do know who you are, there's a kind of symbiotic, there's a kind of natural
Sure.
rolling forward with, and you've talked about this before, sales and marketing become more aligned. It feels more like a
Right.
team. Product launches. I've actually got the accounting team, the operations team, marketing and sales, and the R&D all on the
100%.
same page, as opposed to,
100%.
you know what I mean? we're launching a product. The sales team are like, excuse me, we've not actually been trained on this product.
Right.
So,
No, that alignment is so critical. And I
so
feel like from your perspective, it's got to feel like when people know and understand that,
right.
that's a good time to sell.
That's right. I mean, when you there's a sort of mojo appears. I mean, and it's little things like I think as well. You can get that alignment. I got it in the software company I turned around by an unusual technique that you wouldn't have thought. I mean, I did the obvious things in meetings and we had events and we
Right.
tried to. But what I did was something unusual, and I'm very proud of it because it worked.
I
If it
love it.
hadn't worked, I wouldn't tell you about it.
Right.
It I'd read the book, one of the many books that I touched on Pixar in terms of the Pixar system of creativity, and they built the Pixar University. So they built an internal
Right.
university to teach people, to teach accountants about cartoons or to teach coders about finance. And I thought, that's
Right.
a good idea. So obviously I had to I had to, translate it into a small company environment, but it worked. I had one project manager she'd another
It's
job,
awesome.
but she worked with me, and we built 31-hour courses that people could. It's all voluntary, so with lunch and learns, and
Totally.
and they loved it because the finance team suddenly realized how difficult coding was, and
Right.
the sales team actually realized how hard it was to be in marketing, um,
Right.
because they hadn't written stories like that before, and I could go on, but you can imagine just through osmosis and just
Right.
genuinely coming at it, and where it was a killer asset was in recruitment because
Yeah.
the difference between one salary and another, certainly 2006, 7, 8, whatever, around about that, there wasn't a massive difference with certain roles. But if
No.
you said, "Oh, by the way, we've got a university, we actually branded it, and we said, no, we actually believe in personal development, and these are the courses we run internally," and
Right.
they were, I tell you that, we got people on board that weren't coming
That's
to us.
awesome.
So it's just a one example. It's not, it's not for my
No, I
own
love
ego.
it.
Yeah. So that was one
I love
example.
it.
Yeah.
And I feel like when operators are doing those types of things within their own business to build that
Mm.
value, build that loyal dependency, that base of people who are
Right.
aligned and
Right.
they understand each other,
Right.
that's when real production starts to happen.
That's right.
Now, and as you've tried to kind of build your business and as you've tried to kind of make your place in this mission of helping companies be more
Right.
acquirable,
Right.
who's kind of been that person for you who's been that
Yeah.
that role model or mentor who's kind of been there
Right.
for you along your journey?
Yeah. And I was telling somebody the other day about this that when I see younger, and I say younger in a very kind of just an honest way, younger CEOs, men and women,
Right.
I do wonder whether they were lucky enough to get mentored the way I got mentored. So when I joined straight out of being qualified, Thomson's, the publishing giant in London, I was
Right.
23 years of age. Of course, I knew everything there needed to be known. I mean,
Of
what don't
course.
you know?
Yeah.
What don't you know at 23? I mean, what could you teach
Yeah.
me?
Way
So
more than the guys that hired you.
exactly. So my first bus after a few months, I thought I know nothing. you know, he pointed. No, so I had a series of bosses in Thompson's that made me a much better product by the time I was even 28, and then I got another
Right.
couple of bosses. So by the time I'd hit my mid 30s, I had at least 4 bosses that made me a better person, smarter.
I love
Now,
it.
I'd always the passion and the work rate. I mean, you couldn't make that happen, right? And I had the
Yeah.
inquisitiveness, the curiosity, all of that had to be within you. But my
Right.
goodness, I do credit them. One of them had passed away recently. Others have retired, obviously now. But all I would just say is, without naming them, um, if you can find that mentor, it might be inside, outside your company. I
Sure.
just, and I think it's coming up under the current discussion of hybrid working and off-site
Yeah.
and on-site because I certainly understand totally the COVID situation. I totally understand the desire for maybe a hybrid model, but I'm telling you now that much as we're getting better at these conversations, we
Right.
could sit here and chat all day. We feel like if we're in the same room, but it's not the same. It's not the same as you
I
sitting
agree.
next. You know what I mean? If I'm sitting next to someone and I'm
Yep.
whiteboarding, it's just a different experience. And
Yep.
so I was lucky
I
enough,
agree.
and I think if you've been mentored well, you want to help mentor other people. I don't know. I feel anyway. So, and I do that through my
I
writing. Yeah.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Is there any one person you want to give a shout out to?
Um, I guess I think he is still around in London. There was a one man band, as they called him, a guy called Barry Pearson. I think he still writes in the UK, and
Awesome.
he was ex De La Rue. I think he worked in the States, and he came back to the UK back in the '80s, and he formed a one man band. He was the man you went to, and I
That's
went to
awesome.
him as a young man. I said, "You should be employing me." he said he was the speaker, right? And I think he thought I was coming up to ask him a question, but I was actually going up and telling him he should be employing me. I mean, I had a lovely job. I mean, it wasn't like I was looking for a job, but I just
Right.
he enthralled me. He
Yeah.
charmed me. I mean, I'd never heard anyone speak so well on. It happened to be on M&A, obviously, and God bless him. He took a chance, and
Wow.
he took a chance, and it wasn't easy. It was a wee bit of a boot camp, I'll admit. But I was
Right.
up for it. I was up for it, and he was. I would say he was one of the special guys.
Love
But
it.
I would also point to clients as well. More recently, I've learned a lot from clients. Peter Jones runs the second biggest travel company for high schoolers. He takes high
Yeah.
schoolers overseas, and Peter, he's become a big friend. But I've given him a lot, but he's given me a lot as well of how he built his business. So I'm learning
It's
from him.
awesome.
Or the guy I did an acquisition in France with, who's now my business partner, Kevin Young. I mean, you
Love
learn
it.
a lot from doing a deal in a different country, right? So
Oh, you
I,
sure do.
it's I don't know whether you can teach somebody to be humble, but it
No.
certainly paid dividends for me. Um, and of course, the ultimate humbleness is reverse mentoring, where you acknowledge your daughters begin to know more than you.
Yes, that's a fun
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's been fun. Um, but also your
That's awesome.
relationship. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I think you can always be learning about everything, and I mean that's why I do what I do.
It's so important. It's
Yeah,
so important to keep your ears open, your
yeah,
mind open, and
yeah.
really start to pick up on the things that other people are triggering you to learn
That's
and
right.
understand.
Right.
Ian, I appreciate so much our conversation today. I
Nice.
know it's been it's always an adventure on these podcasts to see where it's
Yeah.
going to go, but I think the value that you've brought to the table in terms of
Right.
understanding exit strategy and what I need to do to prepare my business for exit
Right.
has been
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm
No
going to
pleasure.
post in the
Pleasure.
comments your website and your free resources
Right.
and also your paid resources. You got to make money.
Yeah.
As people
Sure.
come to the site and do these things,
Right.
I promise you that people like Ian, and specifically Ian, he's going to give you a lot of value, a lot of things to think about that you probably haven't thought about already. So
Mm.
take a chance on it. Go check it out.
Yeah.
And Ian, thank you so much for being here today.
That was fun. That was fun, and thank you. Good luck, everyone. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. I absolutely love the conversation. I love the interview. I love the conversation I had after the interview. Ian is an amazing man. He's got a great business mind, and he really spelled it out for what you need to be doing to prepare yourself for exit, how you can make your business more acquirable, and I hope you took notes. Listen and re-listen to this episode because I think it's going to give you a lot of information that's going to benefit you. As always, we are always trying to improve the quality of our guests on this podcast. If you like the episode, please share, subscribe, do whatever you can do to help us grow the channel. We want to be here for you. We want to provide content that's relevant to you. You are what drives this show. If you're growing and scaling a business, if you're just launching and learning what you need to do later, that's fine. But really, the people who need to be listening are the people we want to work with. If you're growing, scaling, if you pass launch, you really have things going for you, but you don't know what to do next, you're not alone. There are many business founders in the same boat, some of them down the street from you. That's why we started the Captain's Council. The Captain's Council is a network of other peers just like you, trying to grow and scale their business. They've successfully launched, they've got things going, they're in a groove, but there's something holding you back from your best growth yet. Don't know what it is? Chances are somebody in your peer group will know, and they can help you, and they can give you real experience as to what they did to get themselves out of the hole you may find yourself in right now. So don't be afraid. Check out thecaptainscouncil.com. You do have time to invest in growing and building your business. You do have time to talk to people who are going to save you so much time by the experience that they've had to help you get out of your holes. So take a look, and thank you so much for participating in the Growth and Scaling podcast. We look forward to catching up with you either in our community or on the next episode. We'll catch you then.